Have you ever felt like someone was being nice to you, but something in your gut whispered it wasn't real? Maybe they smiled too much, agreed too quickly, asked questions that seemed innocent but left you feeling exposed. At first, you brushed it off, gave them the benefit of the doubt. After all, we're taught to be kind, transparent, open-hearted. But what happens when your openness becomes an entry point for manipulation? When someone uses your honesty like a rope to control you, not connect with you. In the ancient world, the Stoics faced courts of power, betrayal, and politics far darker than ours. And yet, they taught that the wise man need not be naive. That true virtue requires perception. That to be unshakable, you must see the nature of people clearly, not with bitterness, but with clarity. This video is not about paranoia, it's about preparation, about noticing what others miss, about remaining calm while others are calculated, and about stepping into every room with both kindness and keenness, eyes open but soul intact. If you've ever felt like you were being played, not just spoken to, stay with me. This might be the shift you've been waiting for. Chapter 1. The Mirror Defense. Have you ever sat across from someone, smiling, nodding, and yet deep down, you knew it wasn't a conversation, but a performance? Not yours, theirs. You could feel it in your gut. Their words weren't connecting, they were calculating. And every time you spoke, it felt like handing over another piece of yourself to someone who was studying you, not listening to you. This is the hidden stage manipulators operate on. They don't want to be truly seen. They want to remain the unseen hand, crafting the scene, controlling the pace, pulling you in. Their strength comes from asymmetry, from knowing more about you than you do about them. The Stoics would have called this a loss of clarity, a surrender of sovereignty. And Marcus Aurelius warned us, if someone can provoke you, realize that your mind is complicit. But what happens when you refuse to play the role they've written for you? This is where the mirror defense begins, not with confrontation, but with stillness. When a manipulator presses, don't push back. Reflect, not with sarcasm, not with spite, but with calm, deliberate observation. Imagine a man at a dinner table, cornered by a colleague who smirks and asks, "So still unemployed?" The room waits for a reaction. The man pauses, looks him in the eye, and says, "Interesting question. What made you ask it like that?" Silence falls, not because it's awkward, but because the mirror was just raised. You see, when someone tries to bait you with veiled insults, with false concern or gentle prodding disguised as kindness, they expect you to open up, to react, to hand them more of your attention than they deserve. But when you become their reflection, when you offer back the tone, the energy, the intent, without emotion, you interrupt the pattern. You don't attack. You don't defend. You just observe, return, and remain. There's a kind of power in this neutrality. It's not passivity, it's restraint. A modern echo of what Epictetus taught. When someone does you wrong, do not ask what punishment they deserve. Ask what part of yourself you must strengthen so it never affects you again. That's the mirror. It doesn't reflect their insult, it reflects your steadiness. Take this simple but profound example. A woman in a work meeting is interrupted again and again by a senior executive. Instead of rushing to prove her point louder or retreating into silence, she looks at him and calmly asks, "Would you like to finish that thought?" Then she waits. The room grows still. She doesn't need to reassert her voice by force. She's already reclaimed her space by presence. No emotional escalation, no theatrical reaction, just reflection, just power. This disarms manipulators more than any clever comeback, because their strength lies not in what they say, but in how you respond. They require imbalance. They require you to be reactive while they remain composed. But if you remain unshaken, if your words mirror their tone but not their motive, they are forced to confront something most people avoid at all costs: themselves. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In this case, the adversity is subtle. It wears a smile, asks polite questions, and cloaks its intentions in charm. But your response doesn't need to rise in volume or sharpness. It needs to remain clean, clear, and quiet. That's the discipline. That's the training. To not just withstand manipulation, but dissolve it. In practice, the mirror defense might look like this. Someone presses you for personal details under the guise of small talk. Instead of offering your truth, you gently return their curiosity. That's an interesting question. How would you answer it yourself? They attempt to cloak a jab in humor. You laugh gently and let it pass without fuel, or better yet, you respond with equal politeness but a depthless tone, letting their efforts slide off you like water off stone. This isn't emotional distance, it's emotional clarity. The Stoic is not cold. He's composed. He sees the game without becoming a piece on the board. When you refuse to participate in the back and forth, when you reflect instead of react, something strange happens. The manipulator loses rhythm. Their techniques lose traction. And they begin to feel, for the first time perhaps, what it's like to be seen, not for their mask, but for the way they hide behind it. And here lies the deeper truth. Most manipulators cannot bear their own reflection. They depend on distraction, on emotional fog, on chasing your reactions, so they never have to examine their own intentions. But when you hold the mirror steady, when you do not flinch or flail, they are confronted with themselves. And few can hold that gaze for long. So let them ask, let them poke, press, pretend. You stay calm, you stay deliberate. You give them nothing new to work with. And in doing so, you take everything they rely on away, because the more they try to bend you, the more you become their mirror. And when they see themselves clearly, the game ends, not with noise, but with quiet recognition. Now, let's move into the next weapon of calm warfare, the art of asking questions that disarm without defending. Chapter 2. The Emotion Vacuum. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and felt like something inside you had been stolen? Not your time, not your dignity, but your peace. You replay the words, not because they were cruel, but because they were designed to slip under your skin. A smile too sharp. A compliment that didn't feel like praise. A joke where you were the punchline. And somewhere in your response, a sigh, a nervous laugh, a quick explanation, you gave them exactly what they came for, your emotion. Manipulators don't crave truth, they crave reaction. Not because they care how you feel, but because your feeling tells them how to steer. In Stoicism, this is called the mistake of surrendering your ruling faculty, your reason, into the hands of another. Marcus Aurelius said, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. That's where your strength lives. Not in matching energy, not in fighting fire with fire, but in becoming untouchable through stillness." The Stoic path doesn't demand that you feel less. It demands that you reveal less to those who have not earned your vulnerability. Emotion for the Stoic is not shameful, it is sacred. And like anything sacred, it must be protected from those who would profane it. The manipulator's art lies not in insult, but in suggestion. They imply, nudge, provoke, always subtle, always watching, and the trap is set not when they speak, but when you react. Let me show you. Picture a man named Caleb, quietly working in a corporate office. At a team meeting, a co-worker named Derek smirks and says, "Well, Caleb probably wouldn't know. He's not exactly known for thinking outside the box." A few people chuckle. Everyone looks at Caleb. Now here's the choice. Defend yourself and seem insecure, laugh along and give them permission, or meet the moment with stillness. Caleb raises his eyes, holds Derek's gaze for a second too long, says absolutely nothing, and returns to his notes. What happens next isn't dramatic. It's devastating. The silence echoes. Derek shifts in his chair. No one speaks. This is the vacuum. It's not coldness, it's clarity. When you remove emotion from a space where someone expects to harvest it, you starve them of control. They don't know whether you're offended, indifferent, or quietly watching. And that uncertainty is what they can't tolerate. Because the game only works if you play. Seneca warned, "He who angers you conquers you." But in truth, it's broader than anger. Whoever moves you, publicly, recklessly, impulsively, has momentary access to your mind. And once inside, they'll build a theater, assign you a role, and trap you in the drama of their design. The Stoic refuses the invitation, not by fleeing conflict, but by mastering presence. In the emotional vacuum, your silence is not absence, it is presence without surrender. If someone mocks you in front of others and you respond with indifference, you are not being weak, you are being exact. You are refusing to let their chaos ripple through your mind. If someone prods you with false concern, are you okay? You look tired, you don't rush to assure them. You offer a nod, a pause, and let them sit with their unanswered curiosity. The manipulator feeds on imbalance. They give small insults, you give big emotions. They offer empty praise, you offer open trust. They want the scale tipped. But Stoicism teaches equilibrium, an internal balance no one else can touch. And in the vacuum, every move they make is swallowed by the stillness of your response. But let's be clear, this is not about becoming numb. It's about knowing where to feel and when. In private, feel fully. In solitude, examine the insult, name the emotion, learn from it. But in the moment of provocation, remain unreadable. Epictetus said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. So refuse the judgment. Let the event pass like wind over stone, solid, unyielding. Because when you meet provocation with neutrality, you reveal the hollowness of their approach. They say, 'You're too sensitive.' You say nothing. They joke, 'I was just teasing.' You don't smile. They bait, 'Oh, come on, don't be like that.' You meet their gaze and you breathe. That's it. That's all. And in that moment, you become a mirror, not of their power, but of their emptiness. So hold your face still. Keep your voice measured. Let the silence swell between you like fog between cliffs. Because silence is not weakness. It is the highest form of control. It forces them to see that nothing they do can touch the place inside you where your peace lives. And when you live in that peace, when your reactions are chosen, not extracted, you're no longer a player in their game. You become the end of the game. Let's now turn to a subtler strategy, one that doesn't involve silence, but the precision of redirection, the art of the question that reveals more than it answers. Chapter 3. Strategic Delay. Have you ever felt cornered, not physically, but mentally, by someone demanding an answer right now? That tightening in your chest, that pressure in the air. Just tell me, they say. I need to know. You feel rushed, unsettled, like if you pause too long, you're doing something wrong. But deep down, your instinct is telling you something else. Slow down. Manipulators survive by moving fast. Their power lies in urgency. They know that when the tempo rises, your clarity drops. And clarity, according to the Stoics, is your first and final defense. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Urgency inflames the imagination. It bypasses reason. And once reason is gone, manipulation takes root." That's why the most underestimated form of power is not aggression or dominance, it's delay. Not because you're afraid to act, but because you refuse to be provoked. This is the art of taking back your time, your thinking, your pace. It's not silence for the sake of withdrawal, it's silence as strategy. Let me show you how it works. A woman named Julia receives a message late one evening. It's from a colleague who's known for pushing others around. "I need this reviewed tonight. Can you confirm by 9 p.m? In the past, she would have rushed to reply, not because she agreed, but because she didn't want to seem uncooperative. But not this time. She places the phone down. She pours a glass of water. She goes on with her evening. No reply. Hours pass. Another message. "Hey, just checking. Did you see my note?" Still nothing. By morning, the tone shifts. "Hey, Julia, no worries if you can't help. Just let me know when you get a chance." In the space she created, the pressure collapsed. Because urgency only works on those who surrender their pace. When you delay, you flip the dynamic. You let them sit in uncertainty, and that is where true power begins. Epictetus reminds us, no great thing is created suddenly. Wisdom, strength, clarity, all require time. So when someone demands you react on their timeline, ask yourself, who benefits from the rush? Is it you or the person hoping you won't see the full picture? Strategic delay is not avoidance, it's examination. It's using time not to retreat, but to observe. When someone corners you with a question, you pause, you breathe, you look them in the eye, you let the silence widen between you like an open field. And in that space, something remarkable happens. Their urgency begins to echo back at them. Their own pressure turns inward. I remember hearing about a young man named Evan who was cornered by a supervisor during a performance review. The tone was sharp, aggressive. "So, are you going to improve, or should we reconsider your role here?" It was a test, not of competence, but of composure. Evan didn't rush to defend. He paused. He sipped his water. He looked up and calmly said, "I'll give you a thoughtful answer tomorrow." And he walked out. He wasn't fired. In fact, the supervisor backed off because Evan didn't meet force with panic. He met it with presence. And this is the lesson. When someone tries to stir you into reacting, delay. Not indefinitely, just long enough to return to yourself. Delayed response is not weakness. It's proof that your mind is your own, that your choices come from discipline, not demand. When you delay, you regain authorship over your next move. In person, this looks like holding eye contact when someone confronts you, not flinching, not blurting, just standing in the pause. That silence, those few seconds, can make the other person unravel. They'll speak again, trying to fill it. They'll soften, or they'll reveal their deeper motive. Either way, you learn more by saying less. You don't owe the world instant access to your inner world. That's not strength, that's slavery. Real strength is knowing you can speak, but choosing when. Real confidence is knowing you can react, but choosing if. And when you move on your timing, not theirs, you carry the authority of kings. So next time someone pressures you to act fast, stop, wait. Give it a moment, not out of rebellion, but out of mastery. Create space. In that space, the truth reveals itself. And when you finally speak, your words will carry the weight of thought, not fear. If you've ever used time to take back control, write hold pause in the comments below. And if this message speaks to you, quietly subscribe. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Now, let's shift to the next layer of awareness, the quiet art of listening for what's not said and watching what no one wants you to notice. Chapter 4. Reverse the reward. Have you ever felt like someone's kindness wasn't genuine but calculated, like the compliment they offered had strings attached, or the guilt they wrapped in soft words wasn't about care but control? We often miss it because it comes dressed as virtue. But behind the smile is strategy, and behind the strategy is a need for your approval, your reaction, your emotional obedience. Manipulators operate by pulling two levers, praise and guilt. If they can't win you by inflating your pride, they'll try to bend you with moral pressure. Both paths lead to the same trap, making you move for them. But the Stoic walks a different path, not in rebellion, but in restraint. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. This is the essence of reward reversal, not resisting the bait, but making it irrelevant. You see, when someone flatters you excessively, you're the only one who can do this. No one's as good as you. They're not celebrating your strength. They're attempting to recruit it. Most people take the bait. They smile, thank them, and subconsciously step closer to servitude. But when you respond with gentle indifference, a soft nod, a shift in subject, or even a still silence, you send a quiet but powerful message. I don't need your praise. I am not fueled by borrowed esteem. This disarms them. Not loudly, but completely. The reward they offered, their approval, bounces back unanswered, and without a reaction to shape, they lose control of the frame. Epictetus taught, if someone does you a kindness and expects something in return, it's not kindness, it's trade. You don't owe payment for empty gifts. You owe yourself the clarity to see what they're really offering. Let me give you a scene. A man named Victor is known in his team for quiet excellence. One day, his colleague Rebecca, polished, charismatic, but always one step too charming, says, "Victor, I honestly don't know how we'd function without you. You practically carry this department. It's loud enough for others to hear. She's performing. Most would blush, say thanks, maybe even return a compliment. But Victor simply smiles, nods once, and turns back to his laptop. The air shifts. Rebecca falters. Her performance lands flat. No applause, no gratitude, just a calm refusal to participate. Now, shift the tactic. Let's say the praise doesn't land, so they move to guilt. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Or I'm just asking for one small favor. You really can't help me this time. This isn't a conversation. It's a test. They're not appealing to your reason. They're aiming at your virtue. But again, the Stoic doesn't fight emotion with emotion. He removes the fuel. You don't need to argue or explain. A simple, grounded, not this time, is enough. And then you move on. Why does this work? Because people who seek control through flattery and guilt are not truly confident. They are dependent on your response. And when you become the one who gives or withholds that response, not out of cruelty, but from calm discernment, you shift the entire dynamic. You become the source of value. They become the seeker. You don't dance to their rhythm. You set the tempo. Let's make it even clearer with one final example. During a team meeting, a manipulative co-worker named Lewis slyly takes credit for an idea that was clearly yours. The room is watching. You feel the urge to interrupt, to defend, to prove your ownership, but instead you say nothing. When your turn comes to speak, You casually thank another teammate for their contribution, highlighting their value, not Lewis's. No attack, no defense, just redirection. And in that quiet redirection, you remove the reward Lewis was playing for. Attention, recognition, validation. This is reward reversal in motion. You deny the manipulator what they crave, not by fighting them, but by starving their tactics. You give your attention and approval only where it is deserved, and that makes you ungovernable. You're not chasing praise. You're not defending yourself from guilt. You are anchored in self-respect. You know your value, and that knowledge cannot be bought or bent. Seneca put it plainly, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. If your approval is handed out to everyone, it means nothing. But if you give it rarely and only when earned, it becomes powerful. And those who seek control through performance will feel that absence like a weight. So remember this. You do not need to fight for respect in a room full of performers. You only need to make it clear that your recognition cannot be manipulated. Approval is power, and the one who controls when and where it flows controls the room. Let's now explore a truth even more dangerous than praise or guilt, the silent weapon of inconsistency, and how to strip it of its bite. Chapter 5. Ambiguity Armor. Have you ever felt like someone was trying to read you, searching your words, your tone, your posture for a crack they could slip through? They weren't listening to understand. They were listening to gather coordinates, to map you out like terrain. Because once they understand your patterns, your thoughts, your next move, you become predictable. And once you're predictable, you're easy to move. That's why in the face of control, the greatest protection is not defense. It's becoming unreadable. Ambiguity in this sense is not confusion, it's discipline. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And ambiguity is one of the sharpest tests of restraint. It is the conscious choice to resist the impulse to explain, to clarify, to appease curiosity. Because in clarity, manipulators see a path. But in ambiguity, they see fog, and fog terrifies them. You become that fog. You refuse to play the game of transparency just because someone demands access. You're not cold, you're cautious. You're not dishonest, you're disciplined. When someone asks, "What are you really thinking?" and you respond with, "Still forming my thoughts," you haven't lost control. You've kept it. Take the case of Layla, an operations lead in a fast-moving tech company. Her manager often asked vague but loaded questions in meetings. What's your plan if this fails? Where do you stand on this conflict? Most employees would rush to define themselves, afraid of seeming uncertain. But Layla chose a different path. "I'm watching how it unfolds," she'd reply, or simply, "I'm still evaluating." Her calm tone, her deliberate pauses made others uneasy, but never her. The less she revealed, the more others showed. And in that space, she gathered clarity while everyone else chased noise. Even her body language was intentional. She didn't overnod, didn't lean forward to signal agreement. Her posture was poised, her gaze steady, her silences long enough to let the room feel them. People weren't sure if she agreed, disagreed, or simply hadn't decided, and that uncertainty gave her leverage. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over." It stands, unmoved. Ambiguity is that rock. While others demand answers, you hold your ground in quiet stillness, and that quiet becomes its own form of power. Now understand this clearly. Ambiguity is not about playing games. It's not about deception. It's about self-governance. When someone rushes to define you, label you, control your narrative, your silence becomes the wall they can't climb. You aren't resisting out of fear. You are choosing distance out of principle. And the moment you stop offering yourself as an open book, people begin revealing themselves. In their discomfort, they talk more, they guess, they assume. And in those assumptions, they expose their desires, their fears, and their pressure points, all while you remain still. In relationships, ambiguity creates depth. One moment you're warm, the next reflective. One day you share a story, the next you let silence linger. That contrast isn't confusion, it's presence, and it forces people to show who they are without the safety net of knowing who you are too quickly. In negotiation, it's deadly. The one who speaks last holds the advantage. The one who waits, who listens, who leaves room for guessing, controls the terms without lifting a finger. So the next time someone asks you to define yourself too soon, pause. The next time you feel the pull to justify a boundary or a choice, let it sit in silence. Because not every question deserves an answer. Not every connection deserves full access. And in a world that confuses constant exposure with authenticity, the truly powerful are the ones who can remain unseen and still be felt. Now let's explore what happens when that unseen strength becomes the ultimate leverage, the quiet confidence that you can walk away at any moment. Chapter 6. The Exit Threat. Have you ever felt the weight of staying somewhere your soul has already left? A conversation, a relationship, a job, where every moment you remain is no longer a choice, but a quiet surrender. And yet, you stay, hoping they'll change, hoping things will improve. But they don't, because manipulators don't respond to hope. They respond to loss. Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." In the same way, to belong everywhere is to truly belong nowhere. When your presence is always guaranteed, it loses its value. The manipulator knows this. They press, they prod, they test the boundaries, not to understand you, but to see how much they can take before you break. But what happens when you no longer break? When you no longer argue, explain, or chase? What happens when you become still? That's where the exit threat begins. Not as a loud statement or an ultimatum, but as a quiet energy, a steady presence that says, "I am not owned. I am not afraid. I'm here because I choose to be, and I can leave when I choose to." This unsettles the one who feeds on dependence, because their grip is built on the illusion that you won't walk away. And once that illusion shatters, so does their power. Let me bring this into the real world. Imagine mirror in a relationship where every no is met with guilt. "So you don't love me? I guess I don't matter then." For years, she softened her tone, explained her heart, tried to fix what couldn't be fixed. But one day she simply said, "All right," and then left for 3 days. No drama, no explanations. Her absence burned more than her words ever could, not to hurt, but to reset the frame. That silence revealed something no speech could. She no longer needed to be understood. She chose peace over performance. Or take Jonah, an employee whose ideas were routinely stolen by his supervisor. Rather than retaliate, Jonah observed, built alliances and refined his craft. One day, without warning, he resigned and walked into a better offer. No argument, just quiet exit. That's the kind of departure that leaves a mark. It's not revenge, it's self-respect in motion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." The exit threat is not about recklessness, it's about calm detachment. It only works if it's real, if you've done the inner work to know your worth isn't tied to someone else's treatment. You don't need their validation. You don't fear their silence. You're not chained by imagined obligation. So how do you embody this kind of quiet leverage? First, through time control. Stop being always available. Let people feel your absence. Let them notice when you're not there. Second, through emotional stillness. When someone crosses the line, don't explain, don't react. Let your lack of response speak louder than their pressure. And third, through self-sufficiency. If someone owns your time, your money, or your shelter, they think they own your voice. Reclaim that slowly. Build your independence in private. And when the time comes, walk with grace. You don't need to scream to be feared. You don't need to announce your worth. The most powerful person in the room is the one who can walk away and never look back. And when you live like that, you don't just protect yourself from control, you redefine every connection you have. Now let's move to the final strategy. One so subtle, so disciplined, it leaves even the most cunning manipulator grasping at shadows. The art of appearing unaware while seeing everything. Chapter 7. Appear unaware, see everything. Have you ever stood in a room, fully aware of someone's intent, yet chosen silence over confrontation? You saw the provocation, you recognized the trap, but instead of reacting, you simply watched. Not because you were weak, but because you were already beyond the game. Sometimes the greatest display of strength is not in resistance, but in restraint. Manipulators are fueled by reaction. They poke, prod, jab, waiting for you to break, to bite, to defend. But when you offer them no reaction, when you wear your awareness like a hidden blade, they begin to unravel. This is the Stoic art of strategic blindness, of knowing and not needing to show. Epictetus taught, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. But what about the person who cannot even move you to speak? That's a higher level of power, to see clearly, yet respond like stone. You're no longer the person who reacted just to be understood. You no longer explain your silence or soften your stance to make others feel comfortable. You've stepped into the mindset of the unreadable. You don't chase validation. You don't flinch when provoked. You observe without offering more than you choose. What once drained you now dissolves before it reaches your core. Manipulators can't grip what they can't read, and now you've become unreadable by design. You don't resist their games. You render them useless with calm detachment. No outbursts, no explanations, just presence that cannot be pushed, silence that cannot be decoded. This isn't numbness, it's discipline, a clarity born from choosing peace over performance. Authority over approval, strategy over submission. You've stopped being the emotional supplier for people who feed on your reaction. You move with intention or not at all. You speak when necessary and walk away without noise. You've become the still force that bends no longer, and in doing so, you've ended their power without ever raising your voice. If this message reflected who you've quietly become, comment below, I am unreadable, I am untouchable, and if you're walking this path of clarity and control, stay close. The next chapter of self-mastery begins with one decision, to stop explaining and start embodying. Your stillness is now your strategy, your silence, your shield.